This is the Gutsy Health Podcast with Juanique and Tristin and Juanique. Hi, welcome to the Gutsy Health Podcast.
Welcome back.
We have a really exciting lineup today because it's the one thing that everyone gets confused by and overwhelmed by, and nobody knows where to start.
Basically, what we're going to do today is tear apart all of the different diets out there, especially the ones that are really popular right now. Mm-hmm. And we're going to discuss some of their pros and cons. And to be very clear, there are pros to all of these. There's a reason why they're popular. So we're not here to just diss everything and talk about how everything is terrible except for ours, right? We don't have an ours, actually.
Right. So the number one thing people ask us when they come into our clinic is, what is the perfect diet? But people don't realize that there is no perfect diet for everyone on the face of the planet. There are so many factors that go into how someone should eat. So what we want to do is we want to deconstruct all of the fads out there, the ones that you hear about all the times, the buzzword ones, the ketos, the paleos, the autoimmune, the vegans, veganism. I shouldn't say the vegans.
The vegans. You know, those people.
We want to break down each fad diet, each fad culture around each diet, go into basically what the research says and what that means for you. And then talk about the common denominator in every single diet, because there are good things, there are bad things, there are good things for you from each diet, and then there are bad things for you from each diet. But your body isn't the body next to you. So you have to take those things into account. You have to take into account your own hormones, your own gut biome, your lifestyle, like what you've been previously exposed to, etc. Do you have autoimmune issues? Do you have chronic inflammation? Those kinds of things.
Right. So really our goal today is to kind of get rid of the dogma around different nutritional approaches.
Yes.
We want to take the religion, the cultish aspect of food out of it, because
look at all these inflammatory words.
I know. Throw those up on the podcast notes so we get lots of hits. But really that is our goal. We wanted to get away from this idea that there is a one true diet that is perfect for everybody. And we want to help everyone to realize that you are a unique person, and therefore you deserve a unique diet, one that matches what your body's looking for right now.
Exactly. So which one should we get into first?
Oh man, there are so many to choose from. Maybe we should start with one that's just a lot of fun to talk about right now.
The buzz about keto. That
keto.
one?
Everybody's talking about keto these days. I'll be honest, I've done keto myself. I did it for a few months earlier this year.
You were vegan for a year.
I did vegan. I'm a little bit of an extremist. Yeah. I like to bounce from church to church when it comes to my food.
You do 5-day fasts every 3 months.
Well, that one I'm still pretty devoted actually to that one.
Yeah.
I've got another one coming up.
We actually really like fasting, and we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah, we are. We're actually going to talk about fasting. It's not really a nutrition thing, but I think it fits into this. And
it's important because it has so many health benefits, yet everyone under the sun is like, well, let's all go on a fast. And it's like, wait a second, there are some of you that shouldn't do that. So we'll talk about
first things first. Let's talk about keto.
Okay.
So
rein it in.
What is keto? Do you want to talk about what keto is?
You can do it.
Want me to talk about what keto
is?
All right. So the whole purpose of keto, well, we should say the history of keto came about because they were trying to heal something, right?
Yes, they were trying to heal seizures in people, and they found that decreasing carb intake actually stopped seizures immediately.
Now, do you happen to know, was it actually the decreasing the carbs, or was it the increasing of certain types of fats that made the difference?
It was both. Wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. It was. It was not a test. Yeah. I haven't read that particular study. I'm like, recently,
are you like, is this a trick question?
You got to see. No, so I believe that actually what happened was they got people's bodies to start producing ketones, and maybe we should talk about what that is, but it was the ketones themselves that were healing people.
Exactly.
Right? So let's talk about what it is. When you cut out carbs or at least reduce your carbs drastically and increase your fat intake quite a bit. And the specific numbers on this are going to vary quite a bit. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the basic idea is that over time, your body gets to this point where there is a lot more fat available for energy than there is carbohydrate available for energy. So for most of us, our default is to utilize carbohydrates, right?
Yes.
We convert those fairly easily into glucose, and then our body...
It takes the least amount of energy to make that energy. Put it that way. It's the least taxed method of energy production on your body.
And if we know anything about our bodies, it's that they are as lazy as they can possibly be. Right?
So I want to come back to that because it's the least taxing route. There are people that have so much stress on their body that using a more stressed route to get energy will not work for them. And so you have to take that into account. So we'll come back to that.
We will.
So keep going.
So what happens is when your carbohydrate intake decreases enough, your body starts to say, wow, maybe this whole carb thing isn't working out for us. Maybe we need to see other people. And it starts looking at the fats and going, wow, that's an attractive looking source of energy. Right. And without getting too crazy into the science of it, your body starts burning fat for fuel instead of carbohydrates for fuel. Exactly. And there are a lot of potential benefits that come with that, in addition to actually stopping seizures, which was sort of the original purpose. What they found is that it also can help with blood sugar regulation.
Yes.
And if there's any big major problem that has to do with health in this day and age, it is definitely related to
sugar intake, refined carb intake. Like, I mean, you just put any kind of sugar in your body and you will get flare-ups. You'll get inflammation. You'll get all kinds of damage.
So diabetes and obesity, probably the two single most prevalent health issues in our society, both related to poor sugar metabolism, poor sugar balancing in the body, right?
Exactly.
So one of the big benefits people notice when they go onto a ketogenic diet is that tends to improve quite a bit in most people, which is awesome. Now,
is it because of the ketones, or is it because they decrease their their sugar intake and their processed sugar intake and their processed carb intake?
Potentially that. Also, they actually increase or decrease their total calorie intake. So so you've got a lot of different things going on with it. Yes. But the takeaway is that people do see big improvements there. They tend to lose weight. And
that's why keto is so sexy, because nobody cares about how you feel. Everyone cares about how you look. And that is so toxic. And that's where I draw the line, because now everyone's trying to do keto and they're doing it wrong. They're doing it completely wrong. They have their macros completely wrong. And they get short-term gains and long-term problems.
Now, we don't want you to get the idea that we're going to criticize how you do things. That's not really our goal, but
he won't. I will. I'm just kidding. Kidding.
We want to call out trends that we consider dangerous. And there are definitely some trends involving the ketogenic diets out there that we think are dangerous. Yes. And they tend to come in when you look like you want to talk about that.
No, I don't. I have something else in my mind that. Keep going.
All right. So what happens is people think fat's good, carbohydrates bad. As long as all I'm eating are fats, then life is going to be great, right?
And here's where I have a problem with that, because then people start eating lots of fat, lots of protein, and they have completely villainized vegetables, because vegetables are mostly carbs. They're good carbs. They're complex carbs. They have so much nutritional value. But now, so there's a right way to do keto and a wrong way to do keto. And people that are doing it the wrong way, they're like, you have to restrict your carbs to like 20 to 24 carbs a day. That's about 3, maybe 4 vegetables. That's not enough vegetables for you to heal your body and to sustain it long term. So when they start to villainize literally the medicine in your food, your food as medicine, that's where I'm like, we got to pick this bone.
And there are 2 particular issues with that, probably more, but 2 that come to mind. One of them is that it causes you to restrict the variety of vegetables that you get quite a bit. In fact, people tend to restrict the variety of all foods they get, right? They end up cutting their diet down to
5 different types of
bacon and cheese.
Cheese sticks, steak.
and then maybe some broccoli or cauliflower.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because our body does require a broad variety of nutrients in order to function properly.
So this is what we see with people starting out in keto, right? They say, okay, I'm going to completely restrict my sugar intake, my carb intake. I'm going to increase my fats and my proteins. And they normally get this massive bump in the beginning for like the first 1 to 2 months. They feel awesome. They're losing weight.
Once they get past the initial kind of keto flu, which is not fun, doesn't feel good. So,
right. And so they start losing all this weight and they feel good. And it's because of two things. One, because they're cutting out all of those really inflammatory sugars in the first place. And then they're getting that the keto, what is it, Tris? The benefits from keto. Because you explained that really well.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure which ones in particular you're talking about. Besides being in ketosis, you've got potentially the autophagy that comes in where your body starts cleaning house, right? It starts getting rid of all the dysfunctional and broken cells and replacing them with new, healthier cells.
It also helps people that have insulin resistance. It helps your body to balance that out again when you're going into ketosis. So there's a lot of short-term benefits with the ketogenic diet. But when you start going past 3 months with keto, then you start going into 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, that's when we start to see the body breaking down because we're not getting the variety of vegetables anymore. We're not getting a lot of our micronutrients. You see, and keto is very much a macronutrient heavy subject. And so we've completely villainized our micronutrients because they're in our vegetables and our fruits. We got our initial big bump in the first few months, and then things start to go down. People start getting inflammation again. They don't recover quite as fast after workouts. They start getting brain fog. Their blood work starts coming back as abnormal again, and they get frustrated. So what I want to kind of point out is when people do ketogenic diets, it's a short-term thing. It should never be a lifestyle change, period.
All right,
it should be a means to an end.
I'm going to partially disagree with that because it really, and I can already hear people out there screaming at you because their friend has been doing it for 4 years straight and has never been healthier, right? But I guess the little twist I would want to put on that is this kind of idea of really strict but potentially dirty keto where it doesn't matter what you eat, it just matters that you're not eating any carbs. Absolutely.
Yes.
But there are so many different types of ketogenic diet out there, and some of them are far more palatable long term. So we had this conversation the other day, right? There's the version that Mark Sisson, who he started, Primal Blueprint was the book he wrote. He has a company called Primal Kitchen. You've probably used his products before. Yes. He's one of the thought leaders in the ketogenic world, and his version of it is a lot more broad than what we've been discussing.
So he does about 50 grams.
You can do up to 50 grams, and you don't count non-root vegetables. So if it grows above ground and it's a vegetable, it doesn't count against your carb load.
Yes.
So that gives you a lot more leeway.
Yes. So smart keto versus not smart keto.
Can you tell Juanique has an opinion on this?
I do. I do have an opinion on this because I'm so tired of people not going for vegetables and going for the cheese stick or the hamburger. So
in my opinion, the best way to approach this would be to get as many vegetables in as you can without kicking yourself out of ketosis. And there are very simple ways to track that. They have blood test monitors that will tell you your levels of ketones, which will tell you, are you in ketosis or not? So you can literally experiment with your diet to find out how much can I get away with.
Yes.
Right. And if it turns out that's not very much, then you might need to reconsider the diet. But you might find that you can eat quite a bit of vegetables and still do really well on this.
Yes.
Now there's one more issue with keto. We're spending way too much time on this one particular diet, but there's one more big issue, and this one will come up time and time again as we're talking about these different types of diets. And that is that people mistake protein for fat in that they say, well, it's meat, therefore it's good.
Right.
Right. But what you see over and over again, and this applies to so many different diets, is that it is possible to get too much animal protein, right? Not to say that animal protein is bad for you, but once you cross a certain barrier or certain kind of a threshold with it,
Yes.
it starts to cause problems for you.
And can create a lot of inflammation. Not to mention the quality of meat that you're eating, because if you're not eating grass-fed, grass-finished beef, for instance, then your omega ratios are completely thrown off, and it can create inflammation in your body. Right. So not all meat is created equal.
Yep.
So
yeah, so I think that kind of wraps up the keto talk. So
some bullet points. Keto in short bursts, up to 3 months. Use it kind of like a means to an end, not a lifestyle change. You can do keto like 3 months on, 3 months off, 3 months on, 3 months off. Right?
That's one potential approach.
Number two, don't villainize vegetables. Vegetables are healing foods. They're the house of the micronutrients, and the micronutrients is where the plant medicine is. And no, I'm not talking about like the ayahuasca kind of plant medicine.
That's a different episode.
Careful. So it's where nature put all of our medicine in for our bodies to completely thrive. Not only that, but your microbiome thrives off of vegetables and plants because of all that fiber and that the soluble and insoluble fiber, basically. So if you are good to your good bacteria is good to you, and it boosts your immune system and allows you to live a healthier, longer life. So.
Awesome. And that's the perfect transition. There's one more.
One more thing I wanted to say. There is actually some research out there that shows that high amounts of fat intake, when not counterbalanced with fiber, actually creates inflammation in your body. And that's why I have a bone to pick with keto, because we have to allow for that fiber and those vegetables to do their job, to do their trick. And so, and sorry guys, that's not just my opinion, that's research. so there you go. Right. So yes, there are people yelling at me all over the world right now. And, but don't yell at me, yell at the researchers. Okay. Do your keto, but don't villainize the veggies.
Right. And so speaking of vegetables, this is going to transition us into the next diet fad. They have one other really incredible benefit. And this is a word, I'm going to be throwing this out so much, partially because it's just a fun word to say, but it's also a really important concept that gets overlooked way too often in the health world. And that's the concept of hormesis.
Explain what hormesis is.
Hormesis is, I don't know the exact definition, but it's applying a little bit of stress to your body in order to basically force your body to adapt and become stronger. It's the concept that takes place when you go to the gym, right? You're either running hard, you're lifting weights. That puts a stress on your body, but it's a good stress because your body says, wow, that was hard. We should prepare so that next time that happens, it's not as difficult for us. So your body builds up muscles. It increases its vasculature so that your circulation is better. And it does a whole bunch of other great things so that you are better prepared for the future. And this idea of hormesis, putting some stress on our bodies, is all over the place when it comes to health, but it applies especially in vegetables, because vegetables actually have some natural adaptations that they've created over the evolution of their history in order to protect them from predators like us.
Yes.
And that means that
you're talking about lectins.
I'm talking about toxins, not just lectins. I'm talking about all kinds of biotoxins found in plant foods.
And we're talking about natural biotoxins, right?
We're talking about natural ones. I'm not talking about like glyphosate, if that's what you're referring to. No, these are the natural things, lectins potentially being among those, that they actually stress our bodies, right? Bioflavonoids. And what happens is they do put a little bit of stress on our bodies, and that particular fact is used against the eating of vegetables all the time. They say, well, this is bad for you. It actually is a poison. Why would you want to put that in your body?
So if you're confused as to what he's referring to, like just think of beans, for instance. How many people have villainized beans right now? And yes, I understand, like a lot of people can't digest them. And there's a reason why. One, because of the lectins in there. But two, because they don't know how to prep it properly. We're not soaking our beans and we're not cooking them properly. And so we are exposing our bodies to these undigestible lectins that could be solved with heat. And then our guts are flaring up and we're gassy and bloated. And then we're like, oh my gosh, beans are so bad for us. It's not the beans, it's the methodology. And so, because there's so much, what is the book that's really hot right now?
It's the
Plant Paradox.
The Plant Paradox.
Yes.
Steve Gundry.
It's the same thing when And a lot of people, you're going to be nodding your head yes. Think about the last time you ate raw broccoli. Were you burping up broccoli for a while? Were you gassy? Were you bloated? Chances are you're saying yes. And that's because there's all that fiber in the broccoli that acts as a natural preservative for the broccoli in nature. And so it allows for the bugs to not eat it quite as easily as like spinach, for instance. But what you need to do with broccoli, and this is what I tell most of my clients, is you need to cook your vegetables, especially if you are just transitioning to a heavily plant-based diet. So I tell them 80-20. Cook 80% of your vegetables, 20% are raw. If you're still having a problem with that, then do 90% cooked vegetables until your microbiome adapts. And then you can start going more and more raw. So let's say you have some autoimmune disease and that you're trying to heal through nutrition. You're cooking 90% of your vegetables and you're eating 10% raw. And then a few months go by and then you can go down to 80% where you're cooking or steaming or baking, and then 20% raw. And then a few months go by and then you can go to 70%. So it's not the plants, it's the preparation.
So really what this comes down to is the difference between an agent of hormesis that is good for you and a poison that is bad for you is in the dose, right? It's about how much you get and in what time period you get it.
Exactly. So time period, right? A healthy person eating raw vegetables is going to be probably just fine. An unhealthy person who has had a lot of stress in their body, a lot of toxins, a lot of health issues, you try and get them to eat raw foods and their body is just going to crash and burn. And so that's why I tell my patients 80% cooked or steamed or baked.
Right. And that brings us to the next fad, which is the carnivore diet. Now, the carnivore diet is a really fun one. This seems to have blown up about a year, maybe 2 years ago when I think it was the daughter of, what's his name? Jordan Peterson. He's kind of a well-known psychologist, but he came out and his daughter basically said that she had cured her terrible issues. She had health issues across the board, and she cured it by eating nothing but meat. And then Jordan Peterson himself did the same thing. And he also, it resolved all kinds of health issues he was having. And then, they weren't the first ones to do this, but things really exploded at that point. And now you have all kinds of people doing what's called the carnivore diet, where
they're literally just eating meat.
They're literally just eating meat. Some of them so strict that they're literally only eating steak. They don't even limit it to just meats, but it's a very specific kind of that. And they're getting good results. They're feeling better. Their digestion is improving. Their brain fog is going away. Their everything just feels better.
Yes.
And some of them, they've been doing it now for 3 or 4 years and they still feel fantastic. So what's wrong with the carnivore diet?
You're asking me?
Well, I'm looking.
I feel like I need a whole different podcast for this culture. Okay, so let's back it up. Let's take a really unhealthy person, right? They're born into this world and they're pumped with antibiotics. I mean, because what do? We put antibiotics on their eyes. Maybe they weren't a vaginal birth. They get their first ear infection at 3 months. They're given antibiotics. They get another ear infection at 6 months. They get an antibiotic. They start getting strep throat at the age of 2. They get more antibiotics. Their tonsils are taken out. And then you find out their appendix is taken out. And all of these things are like, they're not only over-medicated with antibiotics, but now we're taking out all these actually really vital organs. And now, not only that, but now they're getting food allergies, right? Food intolerances, because we are completely destroying the microbiome that helps their body to digest these foods, that helps their body to boost their immune system, because 80% of the immune system is your microbiome. Not only that, but your microbiome creates chemicals through a process called chemotaxis, which kind of signals your immune system to actually do its job. So now we're completely destroying the microbiome. Not only that, but we're poisoning the microbiome too with sprays such as glyphosate, which, FYI, glyphosate is actually not a weed killer. It is patented as an antibiotic. So now we're spraying our food with antibiotics. We're eating these antibiotics. We're destroying our gut biome, as I keep saying. And now we create this massive intolerance to nuts and vegetables and fruits and everything under the sun besides sunlight. And so now we have these extreme cases where these people have to resort to a carnivore diet because they cannot metabolize anything else.
So in other words, the carnivore diet is an extreme elimination diet.
Extreme elimination diet.
You remove foods until you no longer have discomfort. And it's actually a really great way to temporarily relieve symptoms, which is what happens there, and to figure out kind of where are the issues in your digestion, right? What particular areas need to be worked on.
But what the carnivore diet allows the body to do is get out of inflammation temporarily. Because let's say this was your health history, right? Where you're on all these antibiotics, you eat tons of bread with tons of glyphosate, you're just a walking body of inflammation. So you can't eat vegetables. So you go to this carnivore diet and you feel amazing because now all the inflammation is down. All that associative stress in your gut is now settling down. It's almost like fasting, but you're not fasting. You're just eating meat.
Exactly. It's basically, it's a fast mimicking diet.
Right.
So,
but you're not. But it is.
Well, no, but
sorry, guys, I'm repeating myself.
I don't know whose side you're on here.
I need more caffeine. No, I don't, because that's bad for your adrenals, guys. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to me.
So it's also low residue because it has virtually zero fiber, which means that it's not going to create any kind of flare-ups in your gut.
Exactly.
And for people who have constant flare-ups, people with like intense intestinal bowel disease, right? Irritable bowel. They're going to get relief from this. And that's
research is actually showing you guys now that we just talked about irritable bowel syndrome or
inflammatory bowel disease.
Yes. So they're finding that IBS is an autoimmune disorder.
Right.
And I've been saying this for like ever, and people are like, no, it's not. And it's like, actually the research is showing this is now an autoimmune disorder. As we just learned from my massive spiel of antibiotics and like food toxicities and stuff, like we're getting these autoimmune disorders because we are destroying our immune system and eating toxic foods. And so therefore our gut is literally inflamed and on fire all the time.
Yeah. So you get relief there. And then also the carnivore diet is ketogenic. It has very few, if any, carbs, and therefore you get all the benefits.
Literally no sugar.
Yeah, you get all the benefits of ketosis with it. So, so there are reasons why people are getting good results with it. But as you can probably already tell from Juanique's tone, it has its downsides as well. And all of the same stuff really that applies to the ketogenic is going to apply here. But in addition, you have to worry about some serious nutrient deficiencies that can come along with it long term.
Now, in my defense, you guys, one of my missions is to create a massive love affair across America with vegetables. So anything that demonizes vegetables, I'm not totally on board with, and I'm just going to roll my eyes. You can't see me rolling my eyes, but I am. But they do have their places, but not as a lifestyle change, okay? So it's a means to an end. It's a means to an inflammatory issue that the body now needs time to heal, and then we can start reintroducing the micronutrient dense foods again.
Right. So there are a lot of studies out there showing that pure meat products, for the most part, cannot provide all of our nutrients. In particular, vitamin C. It's not very abundant in animal products, but in particular, it's very sensitive to heat. So unless you're eating your meat raw, any vitamin C that's in there is most likely going to be destroyed. And vitamin C, as a lot of us already know, is extremely important to all kinds of things out
Oh my gosh, from connective tissue to collagen formation to everything. Like every cellular function in the body needs vitamin C. And so if you want to make sure that you are not slowly decaying, you need vitamin C.
Yeah, there's also vitamin E, vitamin K2, calcium. All these things can be very difficult to come by in a pure meat-based diet.
Exactly.
And over time, that, for most people, is going to cause you issues. Now, once again, those people out there who have been doing this for 3-4 years without having issues are going to shake their heads and say, you don't know what you're talking about. But we have to talk to the average person. There may be people.
There are exceptions to the rule.
There's always going to be exceptions to the rule. There are people that thrive on every type of diet out there. They tend to be the ones also kind of prophesying about how great it is and evangelizing to get everybody else to follow them. Because it's worked so well for them. But what we find is that on average, people tend not to do well long term. Now, one of the things that happens with both the ketogenic diets and this carnivore diet is that most people end up after about 3 months, they just decide that it's not working for them because it's a really difficult one to maintain while you are socializing with other people.
Right.
It can get kind of monotonous and boring, and people just find that they start craving other options. So that's either a good thing or a bad thing.
Totally.
Now, I don't know how much time we want to spend on this. We've already spent enough, but
we haven't even talked about veganism.
I know.
Yet.
Well, I'm talking about specifically the carnivore. There's, liver and kidney issues potentially could come up. Thyroid.
Oh man.
Okay. Your thyroid needs carbohydrates. So if you have thyroid issues, don't be doing that low carb stuff.
Right.
Bad things will happen to you because without the carbohydrates, your thyroid cannot do its job. And if your thyroid is not doing its job, you're going to feel awful. No energy.
And I just want to talk on behalf of all the moms out there who have been breastfeeding. We listen to all these podcasts and no offense, guys, I'm really sorry, but of men talking about these diets and how great they are. And then us women with all our hormones and all of our I guess, baby making juices, like they're just,
yummy.
A lot of these things don't work for our bodies. So they're in a different league. I mean, going from keto to fasting, a lot of moms come to me with health issues and they ask me, do you think this would be a good option for me? Now, I can't look at at everyone's blood work that asks me this, but a lot of the times, no, like their bodies are going to crash and burn because one, they're still breastfeeding. So they need a higher caloric intake of highly nutritious foods. But two, a lot of them have like sex hormone issues, adrenal issues, thyroid issues, and you need to heal those things first before you can create some stress on the body to heal it in this manner.
So there's that hormesis concept again, right?
Hormesis for a healthy body is fantastic. Hormesis for a body that's crashing and burning is not fantastic.
And there are different types of stressors, right? We've already talked about a couple. The stressors that come from eating these plants that create little mini levels of toxins in your body that your body responds to really well.
Yes.
And then there's the stressors that come from a low carb diet that puts stress on your thyroid, on your hormone levels. And they all have their place, but you have to be in the right spot first, right? You don't go to the gym and start trying to lift 500-pound dumbbells.
No, you do not. So for all you ladies out there listening that are being overwhelmed with children, like, do not be hard on yourself. It's okay to not be okay with fasting and carnivore diets and keto diets, okay? Something that's more geared for our bodies is more of an autoimmune paleo. If you are suffering with health issues, we'll go into paleo in just a little bit. Why don't we talk about veganism and vegetarianism? Let's go from one extreme to the next.
All of the meat lovers out there have been cringing and cursing throughout this whole podcast so far.
We're going to make a lot of people angry, aren't we?
It's the meat lovers' turn to have a little revenge, right? So let's talk about first the pros of veganism. Well, what is veganism? Let's talk about that. There's vegetarianism, there's veganism.
So veganism
Whole
is
foods, plant-based. What are they?
So veganism basically is you don't eat anything that came from an animal. So not even honey. Like bees make honey, you don't eat the honey. Chickens make eggs, you don't eat the eggs. And then obviously you don't eat any animal protein, period. So that's what a vegan is. Vegetarians, now they'll eat honey, they'll eat eggs.
Dairy.
Do they do dairy? Some do.
Well, unless if they're a lacto-ovo vegetarian, then they'll do that. If they're a pesco-lacto-ovo, then they'll do fish as well. Right? There's a million different versions of it. We're not going to try to cover all of them.
So we're just going to do a general like vegan vegetarian talking / approach. Okay.
So let's talk about the pros then of a plant-based diet. And I guess the obvious one would be that it really helps with inflammation.
Yes, a lot. It helps so many people with inflammation when done correctly. Now, you can be vegan and live off of Oreos. Okay. Oreos are vegan. So there's a right way to do veganism and a wrong way. And a lot of times when my patients come into my clinic and they're like, well, I wanted to get healthy, so I went vegan and I felt really sick. And I go, tell me what you ate. Basically, they didn't go vegan. They turned into a breadtarian. where they're eating tons of bread and pasta and all of these really crappy foods.
Chips and salsa.
You guys. I'm like, and so I asked them.
Salsa is actually really great, by the way.
Yes, but chips are not because of the corn and GMOs and another talk for another day. But I asked them, like, are you vegan or are you a Breitarian? And most of the time people are Breitarians and they're not eating enough vegetables and if they're sick and they're trying to eat all of these raw vegetables, I have so many people that come in and they're like, I'm eating all these vegetables and I feel really terrible and I'm bloated and I'm gassy. And I'm like, well, how are you prepping them? And they're like, well, I heard that going raw is the best. And I'm like, okay, if you came from like a diet of cookies and ice cream and you're trying to go raw, like we have to kind of break it to your body gently. So yes, eat the vegetables, cook the beans properly. Don't change your diet to just chips and salsa.
And that's why there's a newer movement that they call it the whole foods plant-based diet. They're trying to separate themselves from the vegan, because vegan, people can do that for a lot of different reasons, not just for health reasons, right? They can do it because they want to be ethical and take care of the planet. So they won't eat another living thing, and they want to make sure that we're sustainable so our children can inherit a world that continues on. It's a beautiful idea. There's nothing wrong with that idea. But they don't necessarily care about the health benefits they get from it. So they're going to be eating a lot of really junk food in some of those cases. Exactly. And so the whole foods plant-based people said, hey, listen, we don't want to be lumped in with that because we want a plant-based diet, but we want it to be whole foods, and whole foods are the best foods.
Yes, fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts. And honestly, like when people switch to a whole food plant-based diet, their symptoms clear up drastically.
And just to be clear on what that is, a whole food is something that doesn't need to have a label at the grocery store.
Because it grew from the ground. Exactly. The only ingredient is itself.
Mm-hmm. And that can apply to animal products as well. You can have chicken that is a whole food, but that's why they're specifically plant-based and whole foods.
Yes.
So that's what that is. Now, what are some of the other advantages of a good vegan diet? We've talked about the anti-inflammatory.
You're asking me.
I guess I'm quizzing you today.
You are. I've never done veganism. This is like the guy who used to be vegan asking me, why didn't you tell us?
So really one of the biggest advantages of it is that it makes it really easy to get a broad variety of nutrients into your diet, because there are so many different plants out there that we can eat, and they all have different positive benefits that come with them, right? There's eggplant, and there's onions, and there's, I don't need to list off vegetables.
Hungry.
You know what they are.
Yes.
There's also the fruits that come with their own benefits. And the more of these varieties we get into our diet, the more likely we are helping to manage some kind of a deficiency in our body, right? Unless we're really in tune with our body or we're doing a lot of testing, it can be extremely difficult to know what your body is looking for, what it's a little bit low on.
Now, we spoke about this a little bit on Instagram the other day. A fruit is not a vegetable, guys. So you can't count fruit. You can't become fruitarians, because that's a lot. Like, yes, it's fruit, it's sugar from fruit, but it's still fructose, and it still taxes your liver pretty heavily. So what I tell my clients is 8 servings of vegetables a day. And with your fruit, you want to keep it at 4. If you're doing 8 servings of fruits a day and then 4 of vegetables, you're gonna start running into problems within a few years. So yes, it's better than most things out there. But if you are really trying to heal your body from some kind of autoimmune issue or inflammatory issue, you want to make sure that at the basis of everything, whenever I show people a plate, I say half the plate is the holy grail of untouchable vegetables. Like, on every meal you eat, half of it needs to be vegetables. You don't change that ratio. And then there's everything else on the other side. So fats and nuts and legumes and fruits and whatever. But the holy grail of untouchable vegetables is never touched. And so yes. So don't be fruitarians if you're vegan.
That's right. Fruits have their place, but they will never be vegetables.
Exactly.
So, so you have all these different varieties of things you're getting in, and they're wonderful for you. You also have that hormesis. I'm not going to keep pounding that, but it does apply here with the vegetables.
Oh my gosh. Let's talk about fiber for a little bit. So do we have enough time for me to talk about gut health?
Really briefly.
Okay. So with your microbiome, because I'm all about gut health, guys. So there's two things that need to happen. One, you need to feed the microbiome the soluble and insoluble fiber, but that insoluble fiber also kind of acts as like a broom within your intestinal wall. So it helps to clean you out and pull out toxins with it. Now, toxins are man-made toxins and also toxins from metabolic waste in your body just because you're alive and you're breathing, right? From oxidative stress or you name it. Actually, some toxins that are produced by your liver because you're eating sugar or you're eating fructose, for instance. I forgot what the toxin is. I think it's like, I can't remember. But you need those fibers to help pull that out of your body. And so what you get from fruits and vegetables is you're feeding the good bacteria, the good foods, and then you are cleaning out the intestines with the insoluble fiber. And so it's this beautiful synergy of health and wellness that your body was literally designed over millions of years to coexist with. And so when you have imbalance, I always say, go back to nature. Nature was the ultimate healer. And so that's what I think the beauty is with vegetarianism, veganism. But I think meat has a very important part to play.
Well, real quick though, one more advantage of the kind of the vegan, whole foods, plant-based approach is that there is a correlation. Keep in mind, this is a correlation, not a causation, between low protein intake and longevity, meaning how long you live overall. Mm-hmm. The lower your protein intake, the longer you tend to live, until you hit the age of 65. Yeah. And then studies show that actually reverses and higher protein leads to higher longevity.
Because that's the age where muscle wasting just kind of snowballs.
Maybe. So, the thing is, we actually don't know. True. And in another episode, we're going to talk about science and these studies and how limited they really are. Mm-hmm. We don't know anything.
Yes.
But we can see these overall patterns, and that is one that we see that tends to favor this idea of lower protein.
So one thing before we transition over to paleo that I wanted to bring out with veganism. I have a lot
more to say about veganism.
Oh, okay. So I want to talk about vitamin A very quickly because we think, there's tons of vitamin A on a vegan diet, and everyone says carrots. So you guys, carotene is not vitamin A. Carotene is a precursor to beta carotene, which is a precursor to vitamin A. So you have to juice like several pounds of carrots in order for it to amount to like 2 ounces of vitamin A in like beef or something or liver. So it's really, really hard for your body to convert, especially if you are an American that lives in America and has a terrible digestive tract because of our standard American diet. And now we're trying to force our bodies to convert carotene to beta carotene to vitamin A. It's not going to happen. It's going to tax your body a ton. You're going to need to juice a lot of carrots. And the issue with juicing carrots is carrots are very sugary too. Mm-hmm. So you're flooding your body with sugar and you're flooding your body with this precursor to vitamin A. And we're thinking that we're getting all these vitamin A benefits when we're really not. So the best source of vitamin A is actually from, drum roll please, liver. How many of you guys have eaten liver? I mean, liver is like the most one of the most nutrient dense foods on the planet.
Liver is incredible.
It's like off the charts for vitamin A, and like you absorb it like that. And so, so when it comes to someone that is unhealthy, that hasn't been able to absorb for a really long time, they have autoimmune issues and they want to go vegan, I'm going to try and sway them away from that because there are, like, for instance, liver. Like I actually put a lot of my clients on liver capsules because of the nutrient density of that. And it's so easily absorbed and digested because, as we spoke about the carnivore diet, it's a very non-complex food to digest.
And a quick note on that, a lot of these diets that we've already covered, the carnivore and the keto in particular, they have been used in history. Well, carnivore, not necessarily, but really high animal food diets. But all of the cultures that did that, the paleological research shows they focused on the organs and the fats specifically. Yeah. They were not big fans of the muscle protein.
Right.
They In fact, some of those cultures would toss it to the dogs because it wasn't high quality enough.
And now everyone's going, ew. But like, think about it. Like our generation does not eat organ meat.
But our grandparents did.
Our grandparents did all the time.
Yep.
All the time. Now, what is becoming more popular is bone broth, right? We're now eating more bone broth. I remember in South Africa, if you don't know, that's where I grew up, you guys. And my friends in the African culture would buy KFC and they would eat the meat and then they would eat the entire chicken bone. And I remember thinking, that is so strange. But it's not. Like, that is very common in a lot of cultures that are not our culture. And it's really healthy for you. There's so much nutritional value in that bone, in the bone marrow, in the organs that we are completely bypassing. And it's affecting our health. So do you want to talk about what the Native American Indians did for women that were infertile?
They would eat animal
they would
organs,
eat bear. They would eat bear ovaries.
Bear ovaries. Yep.
Yes. So when they were Native American women in their tribes that had fertility issues, they would be fed the ovaries from bears to help with their fertility, and they would see an incredible improvement. I was going to say return.
Get pregnant.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so organs have been used in medicine around cultures all over the world. Except ours.
Except ours recently.
Because we like to use toxic medications instead.
Well, and we like our pre-packaged foods, yes. Right? And so these days, the organs have fallen out of fashion, and I think it's to our detriment for sure.
Totally.
Now, coming back to the vegans, though, there are a couple of things that you also need to watch out for in addition to the nutrient deficiency. There's vitamin A, there's also the vitamin D issue, there's B12. It's any diet, in my opinion, where you literally have to supplement to not get sick, there's a problem with that. And you cannot get enough B12 with a whole foods plant-based diet. You can't. Even the big proselytizers of a vegan diet, like Dr. Greger, will admit that you need to supplement the B12. You have to do it because you just cannot get a good source of B12 from plants. The only sources are animal products. Shellfish, you could do that, but that's still an animal product. So you've got to watch out for that. And then you also have to watch out for the grains, right? So many vegan foods, especially if they're already prepared for you, they've got soy, they've got corn, they've got
wheat,
the wheat, and it's
there's a lot of B vitamins in grain products.
There are,
and and our grain products in our culture and our country are so tainted. Like I keep going to glyphosate. We are drenched. We're using glyphosate as a desiccant on our wheat fields and all of these grain fields, basically. And so we're, and not only that, but the soil is so nutrient depleted as well. So we're growing nutrient depleted wheat and grains, and then we're drenching it with glyphosate, and then we're ingesting it. And so it doesn't serve us. And that's why so many people we hear about celiacs and gluten-free and stuff. And we're having this issue, like it just exploded in the past 15 years. And we're having this issue because of the association, right? It's not because of the gluten. It's because of the association with the glyphosate. And so, but your body can't deconstruct.
Gluten does have its own issues, like zonulin, which opens up those gaps in your intestinal wall, so you get the leaky gut thing. That's a whole other conversation
for another time.
But that is not the cause of most of the issues we're seeing, which is the glyphosate.
Right. And so unless you can get your grain or your flour from a farm that you trust, that you know personally, don't buy conventional flour or grains. It's so toxic for you.
Yeah, and really for a lot of people, they need a break from it altogether until they can heal up that gut.
Exactly.
Just like we've been
very
saying
inflammatory
throughout this whole episode, is that there are certain categories that create more problems than they solve until you are at a certain state of health.
Right.
And grains tend to definitely fall in that category.
Exactly.
As do dairy products and...
Yeah. So when I had Graves' disease, I had to cut out all grains in my diet. Now, people ask me, do I eat dairy and wheat now? And I do, very sparingly. Like I actually like to introduce it to my family about once every other month because I still want to remind their bodies on how to digest it. But it's quality over quantity, right? And so get high quality, do it sparingly. But again, I try to retrain my kids and keep myself very vegetable dense, fruit dense, plant dense, basically.
Yeah. So one more thing to keep in mind with the vegan diets are the oils that you consume.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're not going to be doing butter, you're not going to be doing the animal fats, but there are plenty of really bad oils out there that are hugely popular in vegan diets. And that's going to be your industrial seed oils, the things that come from your corn and canola and your soy and what other oils fall into that category? Sunflower and safflower. Now, the issue with these is that
you guys go to the store and try and find a product like chips or anything that doesn't have sunflower oil in it. Everything has sunflower oil these
or
days.
safflower, which is virtually the
and
same
they're
thing.
super inflammatory.
And so what happens is you end up, in order to get the fats out of these seeds, they have to use a really intense refining process. And the fats that they pull out, they're polyunsaturated fats, which throughout the last 30 years we've been taught are really good for us. But the problem is that these fats are very, very unstable and they can go rancid so quickly. So what happens is they're rancid by the time you even buy them, but as soon as you heat them up, they go even more rancid. And then you ingest them, inflammation through the roof.
Yes. Not only that, while we're on the topic of fats, in a vegan diet, it is really hard to get high amounts of cholesterol. And now we will have a talk about fats all by itself and how we've completely villainized fat. But you guys, all your sex hormones need cholesterol. And not only that, but every single cell in your body needs cholesterol. And so in a vegan diet, it is really hard to get enough amounts of cholesterol to produce sex hormone. So we have a lot of women walking around with hormonal imbalances because of that deficiency. And a lot of people say, well, like, where do you get it from? Saturated fats. Well, I eat a lot of coconut oil. There are 0 grams of cholesterol in coconut oil.
Sorry,
0.
Guys.
So where else do you get it from? You have to get it from the saturated fats from animal proteins or from butter or from ghee or, so that is where we have that disconnect. And it's where animal is actually very important. Actually, and never in the history of human beings ever have there been vegans or vegetarians. Like, this is a new concept to humanity. This has just blown up in the past, 50 years. This is a brand new fad. It's a brand new diet. Our ancestors never, ever, ever on the face of the planet were ever vegans.
Well, and why would they? Because they weren't concerned about having a pure diet. They were concerned about what can I eat that is available to me and is going to not kill my family. Right. And so, of course, they're going to use all of the possible resources that help instead of harm.
Right.
And unless they lived in a place that literally had 0 animals, and I can't imagine that such a place exists, they're going to do it. But the other way is true as well. There has never been a culture that lived purely off of animal products. Even the Inuit, who lived mostly off of animal fat, they would spend a lot of resources hunting down edible plants to eat. I think berries mostly, because they knew that they needed those carbohydrates in order to really function at their optimal level. They also over time kind of evolved in a sense to thrive in that diet. But that's what you see all over the board, is that extremes tend not to go well.
They don't.
Right?
Yep.
So why should we suddenly be extremists with what we're doing here?
Right.
We should be trying to do what has worked throughout time.
Right.
And I guess that can take us to paleo.
Which is my favorite.
That's
actually
sort of the philosophy of paleo is let's do what our ancestors did, because they seem to have a lot fewer issues than we did. So let's see. Go ahead.
So paleo kind of just marries the best concepts of all worlds, right? Where it's very heavily plant-based, but incorporates animal protein as well within reason. But again, it's very heavily plant-based. And so, but then there's paleo, and then there's autoimmune paleo. So when you are considering the perfect, I guess, nutritional protocol for you, I don't want to say diet, but the perfect nutritional protocol, you have to kind of take a look at your body and be like, okay, how much inflammation am I in? What can my body tolerate right now? How many antibiotics have I been on in my life? What am I able to digest right now? And then, so you kind of have to do a very, I can't say watered down. What am I like? Purified paleo.
Restricted.
Restricted. Thank you. Restricted.
Yeah.
Where they take out the nuts, which can be more inflammatory. They take out the eggs, which can be a little more inflammatory. They take out the soy and they keep it to fats and proteins and vegetables, basically. Most vegetables. And so you start from there. And I like to use scales, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much inflammation do you have? If you're a full-blown 10 and you got health issues through the wazoo, you want to start with autoimmune paleo. If you're like a 4 or 5, you can probably handle nuts if you're soaking them and beans if you're soaking them and cooking them properly. So you have to look at your own health history, your own history with antibiotics and junk foods, and really take a look at your microbiome and be like, do I have more good microbiome than bad microbiome? And if I have more bad microbiome than good, then let me help proliferate the good stuff gently and slowly. And so that's where you start with autoimmune paleo.
And now paleo has as many variations as there are stars in the sky.
Right.
So it's hard to talk about paleo as this monolithic approach to food.
Right.
The only underlying principle is we want to eat what our ancestors ate, but that's kind of where the similarities end. And you always have to ask the question, well, which ancestors in which part of the world at which time period? Because it's always been in flux. But what we find is the underlying trend with paleo diets is that they ate whole foods, right? I mean, that's what it always comes down to. Let's eat some whole foods. Yep. And they ate a variety of foods. Yeah. There may be certain categories that a lot of brands of paleo do not accept. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, they're pretty broad. Now, the biggest downside of paleo, are we ready to talk about downsides?
Sure.
Because there's one glaring downside to it, and that's that people on a paleo diet tend to eat way too much animal protein. Mm-hmm. There it is again. Yeah. Right? Because they think, well, meat is paleo, so I'm going to eat meat, and meat tastes good. It tastes so good. Yes. And so you eat a ton of it, and that's problematic because you're getting too much of that protein. And we already know that protein is inversely correlated with lifespan. So you're basically shortening your own lifespan eating that. So if we go back again, we already talked about this, but you look at those ancient cultures, even the ones that ate a ton of animal product, they weren't eating the muscle meat, which is the lean protein that we all enjoy so much today. Right. They were eating the organs. They were eating what is often referred to as snout to tail.
Yeah, exactly.
Or nose to tail.
Yes. And kind of like how I was mentioning earlier, the holy grail of untouchable vegetables, that's half your plate. I mean, let's look at ratios for a little bit. If half your plate is meat and a quarter is vegetables, and then the other quarter is like fats and fruits, then our ratios are off. So if we can get more heavily vegetable based and then figure out and fine tune the other ratios of the other foods, you're at a pretty good start. So that we probably need to start concluding here because we're going a little bit over time. But the common denominator, guys, with most of these diet plans, with the exception of the carnivore diet, is the vegetable intake. It's the plants, it's the greens and the fruits and all of these wonderful things that Mother Nature has grown for us.
Well, and really it's the nutrient dense foods.
Nutrient dense, the micronutrients.
Many of which, at least in our modern diet, are the plants. Yes. But the organs. Really, let's say plants and organs. And then we'll all figure out that dilemma of how on earth do we eat organs without throwing up after every meal. That's the challenge, right?
But you can start with bone broth. I mean, bone broth, let's talk about, well, we can't talk about the GAPS diet, but bone broth can be very anti-inflammatory. It helps soothe the gut. So especially if you have digestive issues, right? Bone broth is a really good gateway drug to going into more organ stuff. You can make it taste really good. So if you just start with like vegetables and bone broth and some meats, and then you can even do like encapsulated organs. So there's the organ complex that we have in our shop that has liver, heart, and kidneys, right? Yeah. It has liver, heart, and kidneys, and you just take 4 of those a day. And our people just love that stuff. They can tell such a big difference because super high in B vitamins, super high in vitamin A, so bioavailable. I mean, there's no downsides to it.
Yeah.
And so
we actually recommend quite a few organ supplements, like desiccated thyroid, right? And
a lot of Standard Process, uses a ton of organs in their supplement formulas that we recommend to a lot of our clients. And it's just, oh my gosh, it's just so good. And we don't even tell them that until they look at the label. They're like, "There's ovaries in this," and it's like, "Yes," and you'll thank us later.
Just a little. So kind of getting towards the end here. We're at the end, but we said we don't have a one true diet, and that is true. But if we did live in a world where everybody was perfectly healthy, then what would kind of the ideal diet be?
So this is my opinion. We didn't talk about fasting. We'll have to do like a whole
podcast. We're going to have
to
cover that another time.
Well, my ideal would be paleo with fasting, like some kind of fasting protocol with paleo, like throwing fasting in like once a week, or a massive, like a big fast once a month, or even a more massive fast, like once every 3 months. But my favorite that I see the most results with, the most drastic healing results with, is the autoimmune paleo diet. And then when their bodies start to heal, then we go more towards paleo and introduce the beans and the nuts and the eggs and some grains and so on and so forth. So that's my favorite, because it just encompasses everything.
Yeah. And I'll just,
the best of all worlds.
I'll just echo that and add that I think the diet out there that seems to be closest to that is the Weston Price diet. So if you want to kind of get an idea of what they recommend, you can go to westonaprice.org, and they talk about all kinds of wonderful health topics, but they have this diet that they generally recommend that is basically what Juanique just talked about. It's plenty of good vegetables, lots of good organ and healthy animal products, good fats, and beans are even okay on that. So it's probably the least restrictive out there, because they're more concerned with the quality of your ingredients than what the exact ingredients are. And I think that's a really important takeaway, that sourcing matters so much.
Sourcing matters. Oh my gosh.
Organic does matter.
It does.
Even though they like to tell you that it doesn't.
Grass-fed,
studies
grass-finished.
after studies show that it has higher nutrient availability. It has lower toxic residues from all of the different herbicides and pesticides they use. It's just so much better. So
the farming practices, it does matter, like where our food is coming from, where it's sourced from. Like you want to make sure that you are very familiar with the farming practices around you. Like, go to local farmers markets and talk to the farmers there. Ask them about their farming practices. So yeah, I think that's a really good close out or summary for this episode today. Hopefully that was helpful, guys. Hopefully that helped deconstruct each fad for you, and so that you can decide for yourself what does and doesn't serve you. And I hope that the common denominator was really clear. Don't you?
Which is eat high quality foods,
lots
mostly
of veggies,
plants, and try to get more organs in.
Yes. Thanks, guys. Until next time.